Hey everyone, welcome back to Honest About the Irish. And there's something that I need to do here that I don't usually do. I don't ever go back on my word. I simply do not apologize because when I say something, I mean it. But I have to dial it back a little bit on Brian Kelly. And that's the difference between apologizing and actually being a little bit more respectful for at least 1 week and being a little bit nicer for at least 1 week to Brian Kelly, Notre Dame's head football coach. As you know, the last year and a half that I've been doing this channel, I have been very, very critical of Brian Kelly. I've been very critical of his coaching style. I've been very critical, most importantly, of him not scoring a lot of points, keeping the foot on the pedal like I did last week when I had that 5-minute rant and arguing with my family in a group message about, scoring more points before halftime. It pads on to the lead. It makes it easier for Notre Dame to win that game in the second half. And of course, in case Virginia last weekend did come back, which they never did because Notre Dame could not be stopped. And Brian Kelly always seems to win ugly kind of teams. Brian Kelly always seemed to have that kind of team where he'd be up by 17 or at least 3 touchdowns. He'd take the foot, put on the brake, and then the team would score a couple more touchdowns. The opponent would. And Notre Dame wouldn't win by a convincing fashion. Well, finally, after this Saturday, Brian Kelly must have listened to my YouTube channel last week, one of my 6 viewers. I average about 7 or 8 views a video. But here is about a 28-second, 30-second clip maybe of Brian Kelly's reaction after the game.
We go 3 weeks now without giving up a touchdown. For those that are interested in style points, and you don't like me for this, but I'm not, but I covered that one too. I've got to be popular today.
And yes, Brian, you were very popular with me this week. Thank you for answering. Thank you for watching my channel. I know you didn't. I'm being a jerk, but you know what? That is the best that I have seen a Brian Kelly team play in a long time. They finally played like a top 10 team. Yes, they even played better than they did against Clemson last year. And listen, I know that this team, Georgia Tech, is nowhere compared to what Clemson was last year. But on both sides of the ball, they looked dominant. This is the best win that Brian Kelly, in terms of dominating, fashion, style points, like he said, this is the best that it's been for him since he's been there. Like, I have not seen a Notre Dame team since Brian Kelly has been there dominate a team. Yes, he's beaten a couple teams here and there, scored 56 points, maybe 58 against New Mexico, I believe it was a couple years ago. But this just looked different. This looked like a top 10 team. This looked like this just kind of reminded me of a Lou Holtz team in the late 80s when they beat up on SMU or they beat up on inferior teams. And it's okay to win by that much. And yes, Brian Kelly, you have proven me wrong. I got to give you some respect here. You have a 5th year of consecutive 10 wins, double-digit wins. You have the most winningest senior class at Notre Dame that graduated. 40 seniors played their last home game at Notre Dame, unless they decide to come back because of the COVID rule. But 2 semifinal playoff appearances, consecutive 10 wins or more at Notre Dame for the senior class. Great overall game for Notre Dame. Great way to send out the seniors. And Notre Dame improves to 10-1 on the season. And I'm not even going to read you the stats for this. This is going to be a little bit of a different show because when it's 55-0, you pretty much get an idea what happened, okay? But I would never would, if someone came to me and told me today's November 22nd, Monday night, November 22nd, someone came up to me and said, and went back in time and went back in September after Notre Dame struggled against Florida State and Toledo and said Notre Dame is going to be 10-1 and they're going to win over Georgia Tech 55-0 and they have a slight chance of getting into the college football playoff at number 4, which I don't think is going to happen. I think that's a long shot. I think that's crazy. I would have told myself, or whoever came from the future and told me that and said, you were absolutely crazy. Because listen, folks, let's face it, after Florida State, after Toledo, the way they played against Cincinnati, they possibly could have been 1-3 at one point in this season, but they weren't. They kept on finding ways to win. They had that terrible game against Cincinnati. I honestly felt that this team was going to be a 5-loss team. When I was talking about that rough stretch between those 4 games with Virginia Tech, North Carolina, and Cincinnati and Wisconsin, actually 5 games, I said that was the meat and potatoes of their schedule. If they can get past that 500 in those 5 games, like 3-2 or 4-1, they would be okay. I never, thought that Notre Dame would go 4-1 in that 5-game span. Now, it didn't look pretty in that 5-game span. Of course, they lost to Cincinnati. They struggled against Wisconsin. They blew them out in the second half of turnovers. Wisconsin, Wisconsin is the opposite too. They had they're almost like Notre Dame in a way. I should say, not the opposite. They had a terrible first half of the season, and they've pulled off 6 wins. And that win by Notre Dame looks better and better each week. So Wisconsin keeps on winning, but Wisconsin's, like I said, is just like Notre Dame in the year 2021. No one thought that Wisconsin would be where they are. No one thought that Notre Dame would be where they were after that Cincinnati game. I was like, okay, I mean, this is it. Like, they played this way, nothing good's going to happen in this season. But fast forward to November, they're 10-1. They've continued to get better and better each game. They continue to dominate on defense and offense, not allowing a touchdown in over 3 games. I mean, it's just ridiculous how good they've been. Now, listen, I know Georgia Tech is not a great team. Georgia Tech, is on the bottom half of their conference. I understand that, but you know what? What do you want Notre Dame to do? Do you not want? Do you want them to do what Brian Kelly has been doing? And I'm not criticizing him. His teams play down to his opponent level. Would you have want them to play down to Georgia Tech's level and won the game only by 10 or 17 like he would have in the past? Like, no. Like, absolutely not. You want to blow them out 55-0. That's what you want. It's okay to have wins like this. Notre Dame should have 4 or 3 wins like this a year. Okay, where they don't play to their opponent's level, where they actually blow them out the way they're supposed to, and they're supposed to win by as many points as they're predicted to win by 3 scores or more. Okay, this was beautiful. And knowing all this, what I was seeing back in September, I never felt this would happen, folks. I thought Notre Dame was going to go 7-5 this year, honestly, because there was something I did not like in those first 4 games against Toledo, against Florida State, against Cincinnati, and even Purdue. It just the beginning of the season was doomsday for me. It was not pretty, and here they are, 10-1, have a slight chance of being at number 4 in the playoff, which they won't. I think they're going to fall a little short, but hey, they'll still go to a New Year's Bowl game, which will be important. You still got to get past Stanford, by the way, who beat Oregon earlier in the year. But you know what? After seeing Oregon the way they got blown out by Utah Saturday night, that was pretty ugly, and that's exactly what Notre Dame would need, is some chaos. And this weekend, it's pretty interesting because you have Michigan and Ohio State, and I hope to God that Ohio State scores 78 points on Michigan. Okay, and I know this is going to sound crazy, folks, because you know how much I hate Michigan, but I would rather have Ohio State beat Michigan by that many points and get in, and Notre Dame looking inside, than Michigan winning and Ohio State being thrown out with Notre Dame looking from the outside in. So, yes, I'd rather have Ohio State be in there over Notre Dame, which they will because Ohio State's a great team, than Michigan losing 2 games, which would be their second loss of the season, which it will be because Ohio State will beat Michigan this weekend. So Ohio State will beat Michigan, and Notre Dame will fall short. And I'm thinking that the top 4 teams, of course, Cincinnati is gonna win out. They're gonna win their next 2 games in a conference championship. I think Georgia will beat Alabama. I think Georgia is the best team in the country. I don't think Alabama is a team that they've been for the last decade. They got a lot of holes on offense as well as defense. They can't stop this, anything in the secondary. They give up on the pass a lot. This is a flawed Alabama team that we've not seen in a while. So of course, the 1, 2, 3, and 4 at the end of the year, depending on something terrible happens to these teams in the next 2 weeks, conference championships and regular season games, is of course Georgia. I think Ohio State will be number 2 when they obliterate Michigan this weekend and win the Big Ten Conference. Ohio State's one of the best teams in the country right now. They can't be stopped. And of course, 3rd, it will be probably Alabama, and 4th will sneak in, will be Cincinnati. So, but if Notre Dame would have beaten Cincinnati earlier in the year and they were 11-0 right now and continued to get better and better like they did, like they have since the beginning of the year, I really think that Notre Dame could have stuck in there at number 4. But that loss against Cincinnati is troubling because Cincinnati, it's the biggest one of the year for them. They proved that they can play with the big Power 5 schools, Power 5 conference teams. Even though that Notre Dame is not in a conference, you get what I'm saying. They can compete with the big schools. So, it goes to show you that college football has 2 different chapters. You got the first chapter, the first 6 games, and the last 6 games. In the second chapter, Notre Dame just looks like a completely different team. And I'm happy to say that Brian Kelly has proven me wrong, and he's popular with me this week. And now if you choke and slip up against Stanford this weekend out in California, then I'll be criticizing you. But I've got a feeling that's not going to happen. I think Notre Dame will finish the year 11-1. I don't like giving predictions on here, but I think Notre Dame's going to finish 11-1, end up playing a New Year's Day bowl game, which is great for this team because it was supposed to be a rebuilding year after the rough start they had. I will even say this, that I think Brian Kelly, even though he won't win it, I think Brian Kelly should probably win Coach of the Year after what he had to go through the first 6 games of the 2021 season with the terrible offensive line, with Jack Cohen not looking comfortable. Remember how much I criticized Jack Cohen in the beginning of the year, that he was in the wrong system, that you needed someone more mobile, replace him with Tyler Buckner, replace him with Drew Pine. I mean, he's grown too. The offensive line's gotten so much better that, even Williams, Chris Tyree, they couldn't even run the ball because the offensive line was so poor. They looked like they were in quicksand or they were in mud and they couldn't get out. It looked like a car stuck in the mud. When the offensive line got better, Chris Tyree and Williams and even the tight ends, Mayer, and the receivers, Avery Davis, Austin Jr., even though Avery Davis got hurt and he's out for the year, everybody got better. Everybody got plugged in when these players got hurt, when the players went down, like when Hamilton went down with the knee, more players were plugged in. I think this is the best team that Brian Kelly has coached since he's been there, when not much was expected this year. Okay. And, I would not be surprised if he won Coach of the Year, but he won't. I think there's too many candidates ahead of him. The coach of Cincinnati, of course. Maybe the coach at Ohio State will be in the running there. So we'll have to see what happens. It's pretty interesting. But Notre Dame does take on Stanford this weekend out in California. That game is on 7 p.m. Central Time on Fox here in Northwest Indiana. So that would be 8 p.m. Eastern. So we'll see how the year ends out. Very surprised. Very happy that Brian Kelly sent off his seniors, all 40 of them, on Saturday with a dominant win. This is great for Notre Dame. Now, there's something that I got in a little friendly argument with the mysterious bee woman that you saw in my past video. She doesn't like to be identified on here. She doesn't want me to give her name, but she told me that's boring. She's like, how can you watch that? How can you watch a 55-0 that the other team didn't show up? I just can't win. I just can't win. B-Man can't win. First, he wants a big dominant game where Notre Dame wins by like 50 points or more. And then I get told, well, that's boring. The other team didn't show up. How can you sit there and watch that for 3 hours? You know what, folks? I'm speechless. I can't answer that question. I can't answer that question. I got what I wanted from Brian Kelly. He finally watched this channel. Not really. I'm just joking. And when they win by that much, I'm told the game's boring and you sat there for 3 hours and did nothing. Like, and you know what? To each their own, right? B-Man likes blowout wins. This is what should happen against teams like Georgia Tech. And Brian Kelly did not play down to his, did not play down to the opponent's level. That is great. And I'd like to see more of this. 3 or 4 wins a year should be like this. I get tired of seeing Alabama and Georgia winning by teams like this every year over like Georgia Southern or Georgia Backdoor, Dollar Store Central, or schools you never heard of winning like 63-0. But you know what? Notre Dame blew out Georgia Tech 55-0. So that's, hey, Notre Dame can eat that piece of the pie too. So all is good here in Notre Dame land. All is good here at Honest About the Irish. That is pretty much it for tonight. This is probably the most positive you'll ever see B-Man B. Make sure you hit that like button or hit the thumbs down button if you don't like it. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll hit you up guys later, and enjoy the rest of your week. And of course, as always, go Irish.
I've got to be popular today.